Percentages are useful in science as well as in our everyday life. Percentages are helpful ways to consider fractions or decimals because the denominator is always the same, 100. It is useful to consider the relationship between decimals and fractions and percentages. Any decimal or fraction can be expressed as a percentage by multiplying the decimal or the fraction by 100%. For example, the decimal 0.75 can be transformed to a percentage by multiplying by 100% to obtain 75%. Likewise, the fraction 3/4, when multiplied by 100% and simplified, also gives us 75%. 75% rarely means 75. Rather, it means 75 per 100, or 0.75 or 3/4. To calculate a percentage from any fraction, just multiply the fraction by 100%. Your job is often to determine what that fraction is. There will usually be a part, which is the numerator, and a whole, which is the denominator. For example, 2 students out of a class of 33 students are absent. What percentage of the class is absent? We must identify the fraction. From careful reading, we determine that the entire class is the whole. So 33 students is the denominator, while 2 is the numerator. When we multiply this fraction by 100%, we end up with a repeating number. Rounding to the 10th place, for convenience, since we don't have any sig figs here, we get 6.1%. You may be required to compute the part if you are given the percentage and value of the whole. For example, a certain compound is 5.3% hydrogen by mass. What mass of hydrogen is found in a 32.8 gram sample? Before we can utilize the percentage mathematically, we have to return it to its decimal or fraction form. It's easiest to turn it into its decimal form since we merely move the decimal point 2 places to the left. Thus, 5.3% is equal to 0.053. Then we multiply this decimal by the whole. So 0.053 multiplied by 32.8 grams, and my calculator gives me 1.7384 as the answer, and of course we must include grams as part of the unit. Since the percentage and the mass are both measured values, we will use our sig fig rules here for multiplication, and our final answer should have 2 sig figs. So I will round my final answer to 1.7 grams of hydrogen. We can also determine the whole from a percentage and the value of the relevant part. For example, if 12 grams of fat is 18% of the daily recommended amount of fat, what is the daily recommended mass of fat? Before we mathematically use the percentage, we turn it into the decimal form. 18% is equal to 0.18. Then we divide the part by the decimal, or 12 grams divided by 0.18, and we get another repeating decimal. Since these values are measured, we will use our sig fig rules to determine our final answer. Our final answer should have 2 sig figs, so we round that to 67 grams. To sum up, there are 3 ways we can use percentages in this class. To calculate a percentage from a fraction, take the fraction and multiply by 100. We can calculate the part from the percentage and the whole, and we can calculate the whole from a part and a percentage. Remember, when we use a percentage mathematically, we must convert it to decimal form.